My guest today has 10 years in education, 9 years at Wiley High School, his high school alma mater, and the last 6 years serving as the men's head basketball coach. He's a highly decorated high school dual athlete, earning district MVP in both football and basketball his senior year in what was one of the most competitive districts in the state of Texas that year. He earned honorable mention All-State in football and All-State in basketball his senior year, while playing the two toughest positions, quarterback and point guard. He's a Wiley Hall of Honor member. He led Wiley High School's team to their first state tournament appearance this 2019-20 season, before the tournament was suddenly canceled due to the 2020 pandemic. And lastly, he was named the Dallas Morning News Boys Coach of the Year. I'm very excited, honored, and quite grateful to have Coach Stephen Pearce with me today. Welcome, Coach.
Coach O, I appreciate it. Good introduction. Appreciate it. Good to be here.
You got quite a lengthy one, man. Coach, this program is built around the concept of success never rest. On your worst day, be good. On your best day, be great. And on every other day, get better. I distinctly remember you constantly working on your game and your skill set in both sports. Often see you in the morning in the indoor practice facility tossing the football around, and see you in the afternoon after football practice shooting. So I know you haven't had too many bad days when it comes to getting better. So I think you're perfect for what we're talking about today. So with that, I wanted to get into it. My first thing for you, once again, thanks so much for taking the time. I know you guys are really busy right now. Just like to start off with, your last name is Pearce. I'll talk a little bit about your background. I know your father was a coach, and it even goes back farther than that. So just take a few minutes and tell me, what it means to have the Pearce name, if that's in any way affected you, how you coach.
Well, that's a good question, Coach. I think everybody takes pride in their name, and it's just no different for me. So, the J.J. Pearce name and what it represents is definitely super important to me. My dad and I've got a lot of family members that did go to J.J. Pearce, so that school is super important to me, and the name is too. And I try to, in everything that I do, I try to represent it well. But going to what you were talking about, just the work ethic and as far as that stuff goes, my parents, but especially my dad, instilled that in me at a very early age. And I can still remember going up to elementary schools when I'm 5 and 6 years old and jumping on the benches and dribbling 2 basketballs and, him just working my butt off and trying to just really instill the discipline to work hard and what it takes to be successful on a high level.
Okay. So a lot of highly motivated athletes have stories of adversity, whether it was when they were younger, sometime in their youth, and then they've used that to propel them to excellence, scholarships, and things of that nature. I've known you for a long time, and to my knowledge, we share a very similar childhood, which in mine, I had to make my own adversity. So I wanted to ask you, where did you find your adversity in life for motivation, or was there something there that maybe we didn't see?
Yeah, so I think it's a good question, and it goes along with what's going on right now with that Michael Jordan documentary, and I'm sure you've probably seen it, and everybody else has seen that too. And he found ways, just exterior, interior stuff that motivated him, and I tried doing some of the same thing, just finding, when people say you can't do something, and that's not specific, but coming up, I did have adversity, like everybody else. I was never the tallest. I was never the quickest, never the strongest. And so, that was something that, when I stepped on the court, that was a challenge for me. And then again, it was something my dad kind of implanted in me at a very early age, where we'd go into the gym, and I just remember him talking about, there's people in New York, there's kids in Chicago, there's kids in LA, there's kids in Houston, there's kids in Dallas that are working just as hard as you are right now. We're in the gym where we're going to spend 2 hours today. But there's other kids that are doing the same thing, and they're bigger, stronger, and faster. So what are you going to do to separate yourself? And so I use that as motivation for me. And then, that was more as a youth, but coming up, I went to Tulsa, and I don't know if you really want how deep you wanted to get into it, but when I went to Tulsa to play football, again, I was not the biggest. I wasn't the strongest. I didn't have the strongest arm. I didn't have all the tools. I wasn't blessed as some of those guys who came in and played the same position quarterback as me. And I had to find ways to try to make it, and there was a lot of setbacks while I was there. But eventually, I found my true calling in basketball, and got an opportunity to go back and play some ball. But, there was coaches while I was at Tulsa that told me I couldn't do it. I wasn't big enough. I didn't have a strong enough arm. But I used that as motivation, and it just made me work that much harder. And the same thing in basketball, so, after I went to Tulsa, I ended up going to Collin County, and the same thing happened. And I didn't have scholarship offers, for the longest until the very end of summer. After I left Tulsa, and so I was looking for somewhere to play, and again, I just tried to find any kind of motivation I could to push me towards my goal of playing, and luckily I had that opportunity.
Okay. I was very similar. My mother was who pushed me like your father Joe did. I'm smaller than even you. You were a giant compared to me in high school. But I, remember my mom in fourth and fifth grade pushing me into the shrubs out in the driveway playing basketball and basically telling me if I didn't get up and get tough, I was going to get bullied. And so that's where mine came from. And I was the same way. I used my size as my motivation.
Mm-hmm.
I had the opportunity to be involved with the Wiley basketball program as an assistant coach your sophomore year. And I remember you being a very cerebral, deliberate type of player, um, where most players were trying, to be real fancy and show out. You were more of a thought the game out. Where'd that come from?
Again, I give my dad a lot of credit. And, again, he told me, what are you going to be? But I got to say, at that time, Jason Williams, a.k.a. White Chocolate, was really hitting the scene. So when we were in the gym, my dad actually used to tell me one thing you got to do, your size and your quickness and your athleticism and all that's not going to stand out. So what are you going to do? And he used to tell me, you got to do some of these behind the back passes and some of that stuff. So I actually had that a little bit in my arsenal, but just having my dad grew up a big sports fan, and he coached, and just being around him and some other really good coaches growing up, I think it just kind of gave me a little leg up on a lot of my my peers, and so I give my dad a lot of credit as far as that goes.
So you were surrounded by coaches and people growing up that just pretty much kept you in that, I guess, mode and moment.
Yeah, for sure. And then, I loved it myself. And so, I would sit and watch Michael Jordan and, some of these NBA games and the football games. And I was pretty well rounded as far as, I grew up playing all kind of sports. And I'm a big believer when you play all those kind of things and all those sports. And I played it, competitively, not just rec ball type thing. It was a high level AAU and high level BBI baseball at the time. I don't even know if they still have that. Same thing, even soccer. Growing up, I had an opportunity to go play in Europe for a summer kind of thing. I didn't take it, but long story short, I was really competitive. And when you're constantly surrounding yourselves in those type of environments with those type of people, the type of people I was around, I think it kind of by osmosis is going to rub off on you.
Yep. What we focus on expands. So, um, So in high school, you were a rare dual sport athlete, at that 4A, 5A level, and especially at the, level that you played. I mentioned earlier that I believe it was the 4A district that you guys were in back then was just a beast. Um, so, you were able to be an all-state, honorable mention football player at quarterback and outright all-state in basketball. I've said many times if you were 6'3", people at Tulsa wouldn't have been telling you you couldn't make it. You would have been in the league and not the NBA, the NFL. I totally believe that. If you would have been 6'3", you'd be in the NFL. So my question to you around all that is, how are you able to balance those two sports and compete at such a high level? Because most dual athletes I see excel at one or the other, and the other one, they're staying in shape. You excelled at both.
Good question. And I don't think it's an easy answer, but I think there's a lot of moving parts to that. I think it's tougher in today's society, and the reason I say that is well, first off, we were a small four. We were barely 4A at the time. 5A was the highest classification. We were barely 4A at the time, and it was a different world than what Wiley High School is now, where we're a 6A, and there's 600 and something kids graduating in our senior class this year. So it's a different world as far as that goes. We had 300. It was half the size, and so I think as far as that goes, it's different. But I think the biggest thing for me, what I did is I got the skill. Basketball's a skill sport. Football's there's a lot more to it than just lifting weights and going out there and playing. But I think I got my skill. I really honed in on my skills early on in basketball, and so I was able, once I got to high school. I had a lot of the skills necessary, and so I didn't have to put up 1,000 shots and all that kind of stuff. It was an easier transition to go from the end of football season into basketball. And so, to be honest with you, during football season, I really didn't have a chance to work on a whole lot of basketball because just of the time and the commitment there. Um, and then as far as the football stuff goes, um, I it was one of those things where it kind of came natural. I had a heck of a coach, Coach Whitman, and I think you want to get in that later on, but he gave me the tools necessary to have a lot of success at that level. And again, we talked about just I wasn't ever the biggest, strongest, fastest, but I had the wherewithal in my mind just to have success there. And I was lucky to have the coaches I had and the work ethic early on. I think the work ethic my dad instilled in me when I was 5, 6 years old, I think really allowed me to have success on a high level.
Okay. I'm glad you mentioned Coach Whitman. We're going to take a little break. And then when we come back in this next section, we're going to talk about Coach Whitman, what he's meant to you, big influence on me as well. So we'll be right back.